Create and execute Windows command files. File sort code walkthrough. This video gives a detailed code walkthrough for the quick sort package shown in video quick sort for text files summary. You should watch that video before watching this one, because that video gives a rationale for what this package is for and how to use it, and includes a sample run. You are watching a Tom's Tech Notes video. If you like this video, please wait until you are finished watching it, then click my name, Thomas Wallace, to visit my channel page. A welcome video will play to describe my other videos. Clickable links related to my videos are below the video window on desktops or laptops. For mobile devices, they are shown here. My website, try either one if one of them doesn't work, my YouTube channel page, and to download the code described on the batch code videos, open this web page on my website, locate the script for the video, then select and copy the code to one or more batch files for execution. To do that, open an empty text file for each piece of code, paste in the code, then select Save As type all files, then type the file name shown in the script ending in .bat. I start with a list of the columns I'm going to be sorted, and I put them into an array. I do that because then I can code this in such a way that I minimize the amount of instructions that are inside of a loop. Loops are kind of a problem in batch code. Avoid putting things in loops if it's easy to do that, especially if your code uses arrays with variable subscripts. So what I do is I put them in an array, the tokens 1, 3, and 15 in an array with indexes 1, 2, and 3, and then I pull them out of the array, then go through the code, then come back and see if there's any more to do, and then pull the next one out and so forth. But that way I avoid putting everything in a loop. I'll just give you a rough idea of what the instructions do. You can look at the code, you can play with it, you can copy it and execute it. Remember, you have to use call sets if you're inside of a for block to retrieve values from arrays that have variable subscripts. Now, and there probably are places in here where I didn't need a call set. So what I do, if it's the first token I'm sorting, and that doesn't mean the first column, it means the first token in the set I'm sorting. If it's the first one, I read the records from the file and I store them in an array, in the array Y. That's the only time I read the original records into the program. And the next thing I do is I read the particular column or token that I will be sorting from that same file into another array. So the tokens to be sorted are in array X, the records themselves are in array Y. There's a lot of comments that are debug statements that I commented out in here. I left them in case you want to start playing with the code. You're going to need a lot of echoes, for instance. Uncomment that if you're trying to debug something. They're all over the place. The ones that are left provide status output for the temp.txt file as the sort proceeds. They kind of tell you I started pass 1, I finished pass 1, things like that. And again, here's where I copy the tokens from the actual file, and I use a common delimiter for the tokens in the file to read those in here. Remember, when I read the whole records in, I did not use a delimiter equal nothing. So that reads the whole record in and stores it in the array. The second read, though, reads the tokens only. The specified token puts that in array X. Now I replace file 1 with file 2. To begin, the program read the file records and the tokens for the first sort from the original file 1. After that, after each sort, the results are written to the new file 1, and additional tokens to be sorted are read from the new file 1. File 1 and 2 can be the same, in which case the original file will be replaced by the sorted file. That's not a great idea. And I'm erasing it at the beginning of each pass so that it'll be empty before I write to it. Because the writes will add to it, they won't erase it. Then I call the sort routine to actually do the sort. That's the quick sort stable. That means it's a stable sort. You have to use what's called a stable sort if you're going to sort several columns and you want the final result to make sense. If it's not a stable sort, if you sort by in several columns in order and then look at the final result, it's not in the order you expected it to be in. But if you make the sort stable, it will be. So status message is going out. Okay, what I do here is once I have finished sorting, and by the way, I mentioned that there were a couple of changes to the quick sort. One change is to make it stable, but the other change was there's two arrays. There's the token array and the array of the records. And the quick sort has been modified so that as it sorts the token array, it moves the array of records around so that the order matches in the sorted token array and the file record array. So they will be the same when the sort finishes. So when the sort finishes on this pass, I write out the record array to that file, to that temp2.txt file. I write the whole file out again, but now it's been sorted once by one of the tokens. The reason I do that is because I'm going to turn around, I'm going to read the tokens back in from that file I just wrote, and the tokens will match the records. I have to do it that way to make the next set of tokens match the current state of the file that's been sorted. This just says, if the token number less than the total count means I'm not really done, I go get the next token and sort that. So I come down this far in the code as long as I'm not done. But the last pass through the sort, when I've done the last token, and if I'm only doing one, I only go through it once. But if I'm doing 10, I go through it 10 times, and then I've sorted all my tokens. Now I proceed here. Again, I did it this way to avoid the use of blocks, because blocks cause problems in batch code. I could have had an if in a block and done everything in a block, but then, like I said, there's problems if you're in a block. Okay. I'm ready to do my final output on the listing file, which is temp.txt. So what I do, and I remember I've already written out the final sorted file, I write that each time I finish the sort. So temp2.txt will have at this point the final sorted file, but I'm going to output it in as a listing. So that's what I'm processing now, a listing of the final sorted file. This routine determines the longest token in the token array. The reason I need that is I'm going to pad them up so that they line up nicely on the output, and I don't want any extra padding. So this tells me what is my longest string in my list of tokens, how many digits are there in the column that's going to list the record numbers. I'm making a correction here. I have this statement in here twice. And I don't need max len before this point. So this is a good one. I don't need that one. Then I subtract off the width of the numbers. You need some background here. To make the quicksort stable, I append the record number to the right end of each of the tokens. If you do that, the quicksort becomes stable. If you don't do that, the quicksort is not stable. So I take the record number and first I figure out what's the largest record number. In this case it's 74. That's 2 digits. So I've added a 2-digit number on the right end of all the tokens. But as I did it, I also zero padded the numbers that were less than 10 on the left, so that they would sort in the right order. In other words, it'll start out 0, 1, 0, 2, up to 0, 9, and then it'll go to 10 with no leading 0. So those numbers will sort correctly. Because they're strings, those strings will sort correctly. This is just going to say, well, the max len was whatever this function said, but I'm going to subtract the column, the width of the number I've already added on, because I'm going to take that number off. So this column is really going to be less wide than it thought it was. The array after removing the numbers that are on the right end will be this long. And there's some debug print. And here's my final listing. Now here's the proof of the pudding. It goes through, and it starts with 1 here. I should point out, if it starts with 1, it will include the header. The sorts go from first one to last one, but notice first one is the number of header records plus 1. So in other words, if they're one header record, the first record I'm sorting is going to be 2, 1 plus 1, and so forth. So that's why first one is the one I use to tell where to start the sort. But when I read or write the whole file, 1 is the first number I use, so that I will write the header out and read it back in. But I just won't sort it. So back to the logic for processing the listing in temp.txt. This is padding up the column numbers, which will be displayed in the left column. And it's padding them up so they'll line up properly. So in other words, I already figured out that they need to be 2 digits. So it'll pad each of the record numbers in the left column of the output up to 2 digits long. If they're already 2, it'll leave them alone. If they're less than 2, it'll put a space in there to make them 2, so that the record listing will line up to the right of the number listing and the token listing. I want all those to line up. That way it gets a neat output, as was shown in the first video. So we remove, for the X array, remember that's the tokens, I removed that record number that I added on to it. So that's what this does. However many columns those numbers were, it takes those off of each of the records in the token array and saves them in text OTT. Then it pads those guys up to whatever the longest string in the token array was. So this is going to pad them all up. And once we've padded them all up, we output it as TX out. Remember, we're in a loop. We're doing this for each of the records. So we pad it up to text out. So all the text outs will have the same length. So they'll line up nicely. So then we print one line, and it has the record number lined up because we padded it. It has the token lined up because we padded it. And then it has the records themselves, and you don't need to pad them or anything because they're all going to start on the 1 space after the token list. Remember, these spaces are crucial. Here's the number, there's 1 space, then here's the token, there's 1 space, and then there's the record itself. I echo on the console listing, which is your command.exe window, some of the crucial things so you can tell that the thing's actually running. And then I echo in the temp.txt file so you'll have a record of what happened. So here's the bubble sort. Again, it's been modified so that it moves 2 arrays around as it sorts. The X array contains the tokens, the Y array contains the records. So we're sorting based on what's in the X on the token array, but we're carrying along the moves for the record array so that they'll line up. They'll match the tokens. So that's the bubble sort, and we did discuss the bubble sort in a previous video. Again, the quick sort we discussed in a previous video, and the only change has been, number 1, I believe I added the capability to specify a start record in the array, because before it started at 1, but now I need to not start at 1 because there might be header records. So this is now changed so that you specify a start and an end. So that's the quick sort, and as before, it calls the bubble sort when it gets the pieces down to small pieces. By the way, each one of these tells you what name it has to have, because that's the name that gets called by in the function. Num digits tells me how long a number is, how many digits. And it just divides by 10 and counts is all. It's pretty simple. This one is one of my few functions that does have a set local in it. And as I commented earlier, it's better if you have a set local in it. That way that the variables won't conflict with the caller variables of the same name. Not all of my routines are set up that way because it's a little harder to pass arrays around if you do that. So the ones that don't have that, you want to be careful not to change any variable names so they conflict with the caller. So anyway, this returns how many digits there are in that number, and that's used for figuring out how to pad the number up. Pad numeric is the one that pads numbers on the left end with zeros to get a specified length. You can see how the code works, play with it, stick in some echoes. This is a internal function called from pad numeric. So this is an internal function, and it does have a set local, so which is the best way to do it. But I wasn't passing an array back from here. I was just passing a single value. It's a little tricky with arrays. Here's pad string, just pads a string up to a specified length by putting spaces on the right end. One thing you want to notice very carefully in batch code, spaces matter in a set statement. And the way this padding works is there is one space here to the right of the variable name, of the expanded variable reference. And so that each time you execute this statement, it adds a single space. So you need to make sure in code that you write or in code that you copy that in fact this statement has a single space after the variable and after that exclamation point. Here's the one that it goes through an array and tells you how long the longest string in that array is. That's so you can pad up the array and make it line up in a column when you output it. Again, it's got that internal function. That's pretty much it for the code walkthrough. Thanks for watching my video. If you like this video, please click my name, Thomas Wallace, to visit my channel page to watch my other videos.